This May will mark 3 years without solid food. So I grab a couple of those green juice bottles, go up the mountain, and that would be my meal for the day. This was definitely less than a liter a day, and so much got released. You are not a body, you live in a body. We say it so many times. But how often are we willing to put that to the test?
When you eat this way, how does that affect sleep? Hi, and welcome to this new episode of The Light Leaders. Super exciting one today because I'm with Jerome Shaw today, and we're going to talk about Breatharianism. We're going to talk about what it is to start with, and is there a certain number of calories? So I'll have that question for you. We're going to talk about how to get there, and also about like your work with it, Jerome. So if you're here and like me, you're curious about what is Breatharianism, is that even possible? Well, that's going to be a great interview for you. And I'm also excited to have you, Jerome, because in my search for guests on that topic, it hasn't been easy. So, for example, I've had a lot of the leaders in the raw vegan and fruitarian movement. It's very easy to find the Doug Graham and the Dr. Morse, and they're generally very outspoken on social media. But when it comes to breatharianism, looked into some others like Chris Manley and Rema. I think you're the first that uses that label, if we can call it this way, and that I see is more outspoken on social media, and that is also willing to talk about it on the podcast with me. So thank you for accepting the invitation, and I'm excited for this interview. Before we dive into it, just what are you grateful for today?
Oh my gosh, grateful for life. I'm grateful for the sun today that was shining. It's gone down now here, but I'm grateful for that light every day, just to be able to be outside in nature, to be able to embrace, myself, my body, my health, to be able to, work with energy and cultivate community. Grateful for fellowship, togetherness, and community for sure.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jerome. So let's dive straight into the topic. And I'd love to start with defining breatharian because I feel there's a lot of very different definitions. I'd love to hear what does breatharian mean to you, and like this we can have a conversation on it.
Right. Great question, Alex. This question will probably be debated for many more years, but I enjoy, understanding and defining breatharianism with those two little words inside the word itself. We have breath and we have air. So a breatharian, simply one who breathes. If a person is breathing, you're already a breatharian. So I find it interesting, people who ask me, hey, how can I become this breatharian? Lately, I've been asking people to just do a check, just do a check and check if you're breathing. If you are breathing, then you're a breatharian. So yeah.
Amazing. Donald Trump is a breatharian.
There you go. There you go.
Nice. Okay. So do you use any like more strict definition, let's say, because then it's like if everyone's a breatharian, like why do you? I don't know. I know you have some videos about like life like life as a breatharian, but could you do that video if you were, for example, eating at McDonald's every day and talk about breatharianism? You feel?
Yeah. So the pranic living lifestyle, if you're living a pranic living lifestyle, it's very different from the state of consumption. If somebody going to a fast food restaurant like McDonald's, like I used to go to, plenty of times years ago. I used to frequent McDonald's. I used to frequent all sorts of fast food restaurants before I knew that there was even a viable or even a feasible way of living on
Mm.
less. So living on less, living on light, whether you call it inedia, you know, he who eats less lives longer. Inedia, the ability to eat very little or not at all, right? So these are, things to describe people who find out how less can be more. But the word itself, breatharian, I feel it constitutes the human race. We are all breatharians,
Mm.
though we know it not. We may not realize it, but we all have the capacity to live on lighter forms, and we all have the ability to live on less. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, all humans and animals then also, I would assume breatharian. But so do you prefer the term pranic living then to describe people who eat very little or not at all?
There you go. So, pranic people, yeah, people who are in more of a pranic wavelength, they're more centered on that breatharian bandwidth of understanding that they can derive nourishment through other forms, through other sources, rather than the traditional consumption, of the community. Yeah.
So with pranic living, the idea is that you get your less of your energy from the food you consume and more from things like light or the air. That's the way I understand it, at least. How would you define pranic living?
Right. So just as I said, like, you know, the understanding and the awareness deriving nourishment from other forms. So when I started this journey, I started doing things like sun gazing. That's one thing. You know, many people don't realize that, we can derive nourishment from the sun directly, not just feeling it on our skin, sun bathing, but sun gazing, like looking into the light. And you can have a feeling of fullness, a feeling of satiety in your cells from looking at the sun as well. Being in nature, not just the ionic, you know, pranic nutrition of just the solar rays, but also, being around trees, being with the birds and the bees, feeling the wind through the leaves, right? Just being in nature, grounding, earthing, bare feet, walking on the earth, getting that, you know, that nutrition from that form. That's like sustenance, that's a form of food. Breathing itself can be like breakfast, right? You can be full from just breathing, and I've done it. I mean, I've done it. There's been times where in the past when I was breaking the concept of having to be tethered and tied towards solid food consumption, I would just breathe for 5 minutes and I'd feel completely full. And I could just walk away with that realization that there was nothing I needed, that I was not depleted. So that's the awareness, just the awareness that it's possible.
Mm.
And when you realize it is possible, everything changes.
Oh, thank you, Jerome. Yeah, it's an interesting one with food because I feel on one hand it's probably one of our earliest addictions, right? Like where we used to eating every day, where we used to eating, where we're in certain state, either associating food with love, or in the other end, when we're angry, we got a candy from our parents, whatever. And on the other hand, there is that frontier. It's not like, for example, cigarettes, like you're addicted, but you can stop. It's so obvious to everyone that you can live without cigarettes. With food, it's a little bit that in between where um, I believe it's possible, but it's definitely not mainstream in our society and our belief systems that you can live without food. So that makes the whole thing a little bit tricky. When is it that it's more an addictive pattern, and when is it that it's actually my body wanting an energy source and that I want to follow? As you shared already a little bit about your own journey, and I think it's really good to have pioneers, people who walk the talk. I'd love to ask you a little bit about your your experience with pranic living. It could be either long periods of fasting or long periods of eating very little, and how you felt and how you did it.
Right. Thank you, Alex. Brother, the first time I went long period without solid food, the first time that we took what we call a solid food vacation. I got that from a gentleman named John Rose. He called it a solid food vacation. That was back in 2019. And I was around some monks and nuns from Myanmar. and they had me in one of their meditation centers. First, I was in their monastery in California, and then they put me in their property in Lake Elsinore. So I completely was alone. I was with myself, had no responsibilities but myself, no children, no job, no nothing, but just me to my own. And I was in this, this big house on this property on this mountain overlooking Lake Elsinore. And I just had the wonderful opportunity to really go within and cultivate myself, cultivate my energy, really expand and grow to more learnings and discernings that I had never had for, at that point, for 28 years of my life. So this was in my late 20s that I was over there. And I was only going to do 1 month. That was all I wanted to do. Just 1 month on no solid food, 1 month on liquids, 1 month on juice. That was it.
Just
And after that
quickly,
first,
quickly on that. When you say no solid food, do you include smoothies also, or just juice?
so we would go down the mountain. I just had the juice. So I would grab I didn't have a juicer at this time. So I'd get a couple of those the little juice bottles. They're you ever heard of like Green Machine? Those little, they're
No, but anyway.
they have like things it's like a green juice. Yeah. So I would grab a couple of those green juice bottles, I mean, not the most ideal, but in the circumstances, that's all I had there. So I'd grab a couple of those green juice bottles, go up the mountain, and that would be my meal for the day. So this was definitely less than a liter a day at a time, during that time. And so much got released. I mean, that first 2 weeks going without food was probably the most challenging. I was very lethargic. There was a drain on my energy. I didn't feel like a lot of, you know, the gumption to really be active a lot. My body needed to rest. It needed to process, and it needed to rest and recover from just the years and years, the decades of me just, you know, putting all sorts of stuff in my body and not allowing it the time to release, allowing it the time to relinquish, to let go, to recover and rejuvenate, to revitalize and be reinvigorated and to be reborn really in that way. Because I felt like I had a brand new body. After 2 weeks, solid matter was still coming out, even though nothing solid was going in. So that was my first indication. It was very indicative of the length of our intestinal tract. Like intestinal tract are just our small and large intestine and our colon. The amount of storage, the ability to store, not just our emotions and the mental storage. We have a lot there, but physically, I feel we have no idea. We have no idea our capacity for storage on the physical level. It is astounding how the body is able to hold on to uneliminated waste matter. And so I was releasing this uneliminated waste matter that had been stuck, like concretized, really crystallized and really concrete in my body, cemented in my body. It was coming out. Finally, it was coming out. And after that, I mean, after week 4, I had so much energy, brother. I had so much vitality. I had so much life flowing through me. I didn't want to stop. I honestly was afraid. I was afraid to go back to eating because I had never felt more clarity, never felt more purpose, never felt more fulfillment eating nothing at all. Nothing at all. So actually, that 1 month turned into 3 months. And that was my first 3 months away from solid food back in 2019. So that kind of started, that was like the genesis of, this journey for sure.
Wow, that's crazy. And also, yeah, only like less than a liter or something. It's different also than when people do a juice fasting and have like 3, 4, 5 liter, which is already great, but then it's like a different approach. And really cool that you had a lot of energy. In my experience here, when I was doing juice fasting, but with higher levels of juice, I actually had quite a good level of energy. And I've done a 2 week water fast, like purely water. And I was more in that lethargic state for most of it. But actually, interestingly, I wanted to do only 10 days, but from day 10, I had a little bit more energy every day. And then I was on my own, so I didn't want to push it too much. It was already a lot. I had done 2 weeks, so I was like, okay, enough. And then I wanted to make sure I had 3 weeks in that hotel by the ocean. So I wanted to use the third week to refeed really gently. But it was interesting. Day 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, I would be able to go longer on the walk that I would go each day. I would go on the beach. And day 9 or 10, I could barely walk 100 meters and I was exhausted. I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to the room. And by day 13 or 14, I was actually getting more of that energy, which was really interesting. I did a documentary on this channel. If you type fasting documentary for the viewer, you will watch that. I made it 2 hours, so if you're fasting, it's good. You can and you're bored, you can watch that.
Thank you for that
Oh,
reflection, brother. Thank you for that reflection and that connection, Alex, because you're right on point. That engine was coming online. You were kicking into a different gear, and that's definitely what's happened to me as well. The longer you go, the more the energy flows, for sure.
yeah. Thank you. And I guess with this, like playing also with the collective consciousness and the fear around it, and can be family, friends, and our own selves also. So, obviously encouraging everyone to take responsibility for their past and what they believe is possible and what they want to do. But yeah, that's been my experience and that's been your experience, and I love that we're able to share that. I'd love to ask you also, how do you eat since then? Like what's and today?
Yeah. So after that point, right after that point was when I did my first pranic retreat or breatharian retreat. And I mean, before that, I went back into the food frequency. So I did go back to solid food right before January of 2020 in the following year. And that's when I did my longest dry fast. So it was like an air feast. When I went that longest, that's when everything took off from there. And then it showed me, because once you stretch to a certain point and then you come back, the body has memory. The mind has memory, but the body remembers as well. And when you go so far and you realize how far you can go, you're forever changed by that frequency. You're not the same. Like even if you do go back into the density, you know, now. Like that you can survive on less. You know that you don't need that you definitely don't need, 3 meals a day plus snacks in between what we do out here. We're like eating machines here, at least here in the West. I don't know how it is in Bali. Here in the West, we're there, there's many people that are eating machines. We're eating 3 meals a day plus snacks in between. That's the standard. They call it the standard American diet, the SAD diet. That's the acronym, the SAD diet. So I was on that diet for many years, and I was under the belief system that this was necessary, just to maintain, just to be self-sustained, just to be thriving, not just surviving. So when I went to that level, for sure, everything got broken. Everything got broken. I already didn't know so much about, the medical field. My mom is a doctor, but I didn't know so much about nutrition, and doctors really they aren't really taught too much about nutrition, but nutritional concepts like vitamins, minerals, nutrients, like all of those things. When I went the longest I went without food and water, it was broken. It was broken. It was shattered. I questioned, what do I know? Like, what have I ever known? Is anything real? Right? So that was the question. After that point, it became a systematic questioning of everything. And I had to admit that I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. So yeah,
Mm.
that was very humbling experience.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you, Jerome. I think it's interesting to live in this world that appears to have certain rules of this physical realm, and at the same time the realization that it's all coming from God's mind, from consciousness, and ultimately there's all these physical laws, the things that can be played with probably more than we think. So it's always an interesting back and forth on that. And going back to your dry fast, so how long was it and how was it?
It was 2 weeks. Yeah, so it was around 14 days.
No food, no water, 14 days. And I love how you reframe it as a, was it an air feast?
Yes, yes, an air feast. Yeah.
So how was those 2 weeks? How did you feel? What happened?
Right. So going into the retreat, we were going to do a retreat together with one of my mentors, Elitam. You know him probably, Elitam
Yeah,
Elamine.
I'd love to
So
have him on
I
the show too, actually. Yeah, yeah,
say again.
yeah. I'd love to have him on the show. I've invited him to.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. We've done several retreats with each other. We've done several retreats offline, and also I've done retreats with him online. So I've been around him since then. So now 5 years now. It's been 5 years now that I've known him in the physical. And he was one of the biggest, not just proponents, but biggest inspirations for me with this vibration, because he showed me that, hey, this is possible. Like, this can be done. If I'm watching this guy, he's laughing every day, he's walking every day, he's talking every day, and I'm with him for hours all day long. He's not eating, he's not drinking, and he doesn't need to go to use the restroom. So nothing is coming in his body, nothing is going out his body, and we're with him all day long. So it was I was going in, I went in 5 days dry into the retreat. The retreat, it lasted 8 or 9 days, and I came out dry as well. So by the time I came out dry from the retreat, that's when my life took off. That's when pretty much I questioned everything about my reality. And I had a whole new mentality about this existence, about who I am and what I am, that I am not just this flesh and bone. This is not just me. Like, I'm like the energy that is inhabiting this vessel for now. Like, I'm the energy that's powering this vehicle. We hear it. We hear it so often, Alex. We hear it ad nauseum. It's almost a cliche to say, you're a spiritual being having a human experience. You are not a body, you live in a body. We say it so many times. But how often are we willing to put that to the test? Like those words, do we put it to the test? Do we really believe that? We hear it all the time, but do we really receive that? So, I wasn't planning on going that long without food and water. I was just taking it day by day. And my body was leading me along the way. My body was saying, hey, we're good. I was like, okay, if tomorrow, if I wake up and we're still good, then I'll keep going. If I wake up, we're still good, then I'll keep going. And that was day by day. And then by the time that, I got into the later days, reality was very trippy at that point. It was very trippy for sure. So yeah, that was a very big revelation for me, but it was a crossroads. It was letting me know, hey, you're not crazy. You just discovered something that many people perhaps have forgotten. Like, we're remembering. It's almost like not even a sort of an evolution, but it's a realization of the devolution. Like, how have we descended from that state of ascension that we already have intuitively? I believe that we already have this within our DNA. And I can only imagine, I don't know for sure, but I can only imagine what they call, our Paleolithic ancestors who were migrating, states of migration, going from long distance, walking without food. How did we survive? How did we get here? With all the abundance that we have now, with all the skyscrapers we have now, with all the fast food stores and restaurants and grocery stores and refrigerators and pantries and freezers and all the things that we have now, how did we even get here? Like, we would have had something to carry us through those long periods, even before the agriculture of farming, of, harvesting and planting and having food in abundance and all this stuff. There was no, you know what I mean? So it's just a remembrance. I think it's remembering who we are and what we are, and just that understanding that the standards that we have today, they're today's standards, but
Yeah.
these are kind of blown out of proportion compared to what we're actually capable of. Yeah.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Thank you, Jerome. I like that. And obviously, with the evolution part, is that definitely speaks for fasting. Like when you were in the wild or something, you'd have many days when you need to fast, and then when it comes to, did we still need food to survive at the time? I guess you could feel into maybe not, but let's say the collective consensus would probably be still that we did at the time, but at least for sure we wouldn't have 3 meals a day and all the convenience that
For
that
sure.
we have today. Yes. um but yeah,
Speaking of
yeah.
which, one of the reasons why I feel intuitively in my heart that we were living a very different vibration, a very different frequency during those days, is that when I went 2 weeks dry, something kicked on. Just like when you were weak on day 9, but then on day 14 you had more energy. An engine clicked. Something came online, and even when I went out in cold, it was cold. It was freezing. I had to get outside. I had to be outdoors. I couldn't be inside. I had to be outside. I had to go out into nature. It didn't matter. I was walking the street, just walking. And I remember it was freezing cold, but I didn't have like a huge jacket. And I wasn't cold. I wasn't freezing. I wasn't shivering. Like there was
Mm,
something that was like a furnace in my body. There was like an internal flame, like an internal fire that was just vibrating higher. Like I was walking and I was on top of the world. I had never felt like that in my life. And it was like just an internal furnace that was just burning because there was nothing in there to block it. There was no water, there was no earth to stop the fire. So the flame was online. So
mm,
I can only imagine that, we definitely were equipped to be in colder climates, colder conditions with this, with, maybe we didn't call it fasting, but naturally we were able to tap into something that allowed us to adapt. Like through adaptation, we continued and we kept going. So that kind of, what I felt during that period felt very ancestral. It felt like I was discovering something and uncovering something that was already there. So
mm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you share there, and there's that almost more tribal maybe perception of how what our bodies are capable of, but also from a more consciousness perspective, it's like it's such a different consciousness, right? And obviously even who we are, there is the story that okay, we were these homo sapiens and we're doing this and that. Ultimately to me we're also from consciousness, and so it's not always so clear the reality of where we were 10,000 years ago. But the state of consciousness that I want to talk about when we're fasting is actually, you talked about it being trippy. It can be similar to things like being on psychedelics. Or now you talked about the cold. I often I can have these experiences also when I'm in an ice bath for a while, and it's almost like I'm still in my body and grounded somewhere, but in some ways I'm tripping also. Just put it
Right.
this way.
Right.
And so the cold, the
Right.
lack of food, they put us in that slightly more multi-dimensional space beyond the body. But then it's cool to see that there are things that we can come back to it and be like, yeah, actually didn't eat and drink for 2 weeks and I'm doing great. And that's actually grounded in the material. So it is very interesting. And again, I want to renew my appreciation for you coming on the show, talking about this topic that can be tricky, that can be triggering for some people. And again, I want to reiterate here, that's not like medical advice. Do what your body and your heart leads you to do. But yeah, I appreciate that you have that voice and talk about it online. And I want to also send some gratitude to the viewers and the people who are curious to hear this conversation And I'd love to hear from you. If you have anything you want to share in the comments, I read them all and I reply to them all. So please share your thoughts on this, your experience. And also, for me, it's such an honor to have you, Jerome, on the show and to talk about these topics that aren't talked a lot about. So I feel that's an important purpose. And I want to direct the viewer also that if you are a conscious leader and you have a podcast within you, I've started podcast coaching. So you can check the link in the description and we can have a free session, a conversation, because I love to help other conscious leaders to also start their podcast and their YouTube channel and share important voices like the one of Jerome on YouTube and Spotify and Instagram and other social media presence. So yeah, thank you so much, Jerome, also for doing this. And for yeah, I'd be interested actually. How does it work for you socially? Because already, as someone who I would label myself mainly as a raw vegan, I'm not purely strict with it, but that's most of what I eat and fruit based. And already socially, even living in Ubud, where there's many raw and at least vegan restaurants, it can be a little challenging. How is it to be a pranic in our day and age?
Yeah. Great question once again, Alex. That has definitely been a learning over these years, over these past years. So it's been since May of 2022 that I haven't had solid food. So this May will mark 3 years without solid food. But during this time, I've kind of pretty much adapted to not telling anybody that I live this lifestyle. The people that know are people who know me, people who've seen me online, people who have come through that channel online, my YouTube or my podcast or wherever they hear my story. Those channels are where people find out. But these people out here at the grocery store where I get my juice, and no, they don't know. They have no idea. So I don't, because I don't tell them, you know.
Well,
So I understand that.
how about if when people invite you for a meal or something at a restaurant?
Yeah. So that's not. I mean, that doesn't really happen. Like, if it does happen, it doesn't happen often. Like, I can't remember the last time that happened. Somebody asking me out to a meal. I live a very solitary life. I do associate with community, but I spend a lot of my time alone. And I can be very extroverted, but at my core, I'm a very introverted individual. I enjoy my alone time. I take myself out, to go places, but to be in spaces and be in places now is different than back then. Now, when we're talking about things like Thanksgiving, being around family, yeah, I mean, I still go with my family every year to Thanksgiving. But even if I have just a glass of orange juice, you know, like I can be around other people who are eating, even when I'm not eating, you know? So it's funny, I've even written some of my books in fast food restaurants. Like I've sat right there at In and Out and just meditated in between writing chapters. And people have actually walked by, brother. People have offered me food. They're like, "Yo, do you need something? Can we get you something? We have some extra food over here. Do you need, People have offered me food when I'm in different locations, and I always, politely just say I'm okay, I'm good. But I have been in the past. I've been over at friends' houses, and I remember one of my good friends in Dallas, Texas. He had a period of adjustment, Alex. He had to adjust to me not eating. It was almost like there was like a giver's guilt, or there was like a frequency of guilt. Like, you're not eating. I'm eating in front of you, but you're not eating, you know? And so since he could not conceptualize or even perceive himself not eating, he could only imagine the suffering that I must be going through because I'm not eating, you know? And so in his perception, in his mind, he was like, there must be, I mean, you must be really going through it. Like, are you sure? You sure you don't want anything? Are you sure? Like, nothing? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And he would ask me, are you sure you can't have it? Man, I feel so bad eating this in front of you. Are you sure you can't have this? And I had to tell him, like, hey, brother, I can have anything I want. Like I'm choosing, it's a choice. I'm just choosing not to. And so he kind of scratched his head for a while, and it took him just a few days, just a series of days, to see me and just to witness me in close proximity, just to see how I move and maneuver, to understand, okay, he's gonna be okay. He's fine. He's functioning. He's walking every day. He's not fainting. He's not fatigued. He's not tired. He's talking every day. He's functioning. You know, he may be doing something different, but he's still Jerome. He's still the same. So that was the same with my parents. Both of them had a big intervention when they first got wind of me doing this. That was a big ordeal, right? And then I had to be around them for at least, a month or so, and they had to see me not eating and see me not depleting while I'm not eating and while I'm not needing, for them to say, okay, he's going to be fine, right? So that's the same with everybody. It's just like you're stepping into their field of awareness, allowing them to see what's possible. It's not necessarily always for you. Sometimes it's for the other person. So yeah, I'm not really bothered at this point by other people eating. It doesn't bother me. But it can bother someone else when you're not doing something that sort of invalidates them in that way.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and but yeah, it's very pioneer in our world today. So I guess it probably still works better if with people who are good with a slightly more solitary life. And yeah, you can still go to the restaurants and not eat. Or well,
Right.
but yeah, it's probably like. And do you have a partner?
So I have in the past I've had a couple, I would say, yeah, a couple partners that we were doing this together. I have recently a previous partner of mine. She's on this wavelength as well. So she doesn't call it, breatharianism or pranic living. That's just how she lives. That's just how she lives. She just doesn't eat solids like the rest of her family and the rest of people around her. So that was actually awesome, just to be with somebody, and there doesn't have to be a plate or a cup or something between you, you know, to have a meaningful dialogue and conversation, and just share that vibration and have that communication with someone without the need to have something in between, you know? So it's very refreshing. And, before that, I had another partner, and we were both doing this as well. And that was when we were both learning about it, actually. So we came into it together, and we're still good friends today. So
Nice.
yeah, it's possible. It's possible.
you you could find it's a bit niche. It's a smaller pond, but it still exists.
Yeah, yeah.
And I guess you can inspire people, of course. With being in your proximity, they will get inspired. And how do you feel strength wise? There's a topic I've been exploring on the raw vegan, for example, and fruitarian. It's like there's different layers. There's now it's more accepted in the collective consciousness that you can be vegan and strong. And then raw vegan fruitarian is like, but you can see some example. Um, in the breatharian, I mean, is it something you really don't care about, or do you feel actually quite strong? And do you feel your like the body can also represent that strength, and without being a bodybuilder but having like a good looking strong body with eating so little? Do you think that's possible?
Absolutely. I know that it's possible. Now, I feel strong, doing qigong. I feel strong in, the wavelengths of Tai Chi, that kind of frequency. I do a lot of, energy work. So I'm like lifting etheric weights for my energy body. So my strength comes from the energy. I focus more on the energy. Whereas, a traditional bodybuilder will focus more on the physical. I'm focusing more on the metaphysical. So that's where my strength lies, in the metaphysical, in the energetic, in the etheric, that vibration. But when it comes to the body itself, yeah, I can still do planks, I can still do push-ups. I do more calisthenics than anything else. I don't really lift any weights anymore. I used to, back in the day, but not anymore. I walk long distance, so I walk at least 10,000 steps a day, so around, 6 miles at least, per day. And that's pretty average. When I was going long stretches without anything at all, I was pushing 10 miles a day. 10 miles a day. I mean, and it was feeling like I could keep going. There was like an engine that was just like a turbine or like a gyro, like a dynamo, that it's giving. It's like energy, or I should say exercise, wasn't tiring me out as much as it used to when I was eating. When I was eating, I would feel tired after exercise. I would feel like, oh man, that was tough. But then when I wasn't eating anymore, exercise became like food. It was like I was feeding on exercise. It was energizing me to exercise. So I found more movement with improvement. So every day I'm in movement. Every day I'm in stillness. And every day I work with my body and mind in that way. So my focus would be more on the mental muscles and the energetic muscles, whereas someone like Elitam, he focuses a lot on his body, a lot more than I do. You see him in different videos and different pictures. He's not even shy about it. He's really not shy. He'll be flexing and posing and, because he wants people to understand, or, whatever his reasons are. But you're looking at somebody who's not ingesting anything, but they have the physical capability. Like you know, I mean, he can work out with the best of them when it comes to calisthenics, when it comes to like all sorts of stuff. And, when you see him, you're like, wow, this is real. So he
Mm.
showed me what's possible. Although that's not my focus, I understand that there are no limitations, but our imagination, for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Jerome. That's very inspirational. I had a podcast when he was in Bali with Devon, the black airbender. Maybe you know him too. And
Right, Devon?
he also has really cool energy and cultivating a lot of that energy practice. And for the viewer, if you want to watch the episode, you can type Devon on my channel and you should be able to find that. I have so many questions, but I don't want to keep it too long. But I want to ask you about sleep. Do you feel so? Well, just to be clear, right now you're mainly drinking juice during the day. We can cover also. I think you're doing urine therapy also, but you're having these things during the day and maybe a few liter, but mainly not that many calories. And if when you eat this way, how does that affect sleep?
Hmm. Yeah. So the less in my body, then the less I have to recover. When it comes to sleep, the less rest I need. The less I'm digesting, the less my body is resting. When it comes to like being just in that prone position and being comatose, like I used to, I mean, it used to be 8 or 9, that was the standard, at least 8 or 9 hours. When I got into, the wavelengths of going less and less and less, and then just being on liquid entirely, then it went down to like 4 hours. Then when I was going just without nothing at all, it went down to 2 and 3 hours. And I was feeling like my battery was fully charged at 2 and 3 hours. So I was getting like 3 hours of sleep or less sometimes, feeling fully charged, like I'm ready for the next day. Like it was so surreal. I always laugh when I'm talking about this because it was mind blowing. It was mind blowing. I had never, I thought something was wrong. I thought, like, do I have insomnia? What's going on? Like, I'm not sleeping. And then when I finally did go to sleep, I only slept for a few hours and I woke up and I was ready to go. And the sun had not even risen. Like, the sun had not even come up and everybody else was asleep. So my heart goes out to people because I know that it can feel like a lonely journey. It can feel like you're all alone. Like nobody, you can't relate anymore with other people because when you get in these high frequencies, it's like you have so much energy that, this thing that everybody's looking for called energy. You don't know what to do with it all. So you have to get creative. Because if you don't, then naturally you're going to gravitate, you're going to go eat. to put yourself back to sleep because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable just to be awake for that long. Like when the sleep quota goes down, to just sinks all the way down and you're not sleeping, right? Not that you're trying to force yourself to not sleep, like force yourself to stay awake. You're just awake. And everybody else is asleep. You're awake. Like what do I do now? Right? Like, dang, you try to sleep, you can't sleep. You're like, I should be sleeping for decades of my life. This was when I was down, but I'm not down anymore. I'm up now. I'm awake now. Do I put myself back to sleep or stay awake? That's the choice that we make. That's the choice that we make. So now that I am consuming juice, on the regular, that I do consume juice during the day, I go to sleep, it would be 4 to 6. 6 would be the absolute maximum. But, if I go to sleep, tonight at maybe 9 or 10 p.m., I'm waking up at 3 a.m. That's how it is. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you. But yeah, definitely a new reality that one needs to adjust to. But thank you for sharing this. Wow, that's such a powerful conversation, Jerome. Such a powerful episode. I'm so grateful to have you and share that on the internet today. I'm very grateful for everyone still viewing 45 minutes in. And if you feel that's an important message, I think it's a really important message. I'd love this episode to do really well. So you can support by sharing this episode with a friend or two that you feel would really benefit from hearing this new paradigm, and also liking the video, putting a comment, subscribing to the channel. So thank you so much. We're going to close soon, but one more topic, two more actually. Let's do, but one, let's do urine therapy. So you are doing urine therapy, drinking your own urine as part of your consumption, and how does that help you?
Right. So, it's regarded as many different names it's called, many different monikers for it. Some people call it Urine therapy. Some people call it Shivambu. That's, what is known in India, Shivambu. It's revered in that way. And, the golden elixir, the elixir of life, the fountain of youth, plasma, your ultra filtered plasma water. That's the medical term. The medical terminology for urine is plasma ultrafiltrate. So, I was under the belief system and the knowledge that this was a form of waste filtration, whereas now I found that it is a form of blood filtration. It's a derivative. It's a filtering your blood. It's your blood plasma. So this is your ultra filtered blood plasma. So you are your own filtration system. The body is filtering all the time. And that's what we call it. That's even, that's the legit medical term, but we don't regard it that way. We regard it as waste. We regard it as filth. We regard it like it needs to be discarded. And we flush the medicine down the toilet every day. The remedy that actually could be saving us. We flush it down the toilet every day. Now, I definitely was not in this understanding years ago. It was February of 2020 when I started. So when I started plasma looping, when I started recycling my own water, was back in February of 2020, and I've been doing it every day ever since. So, yeah.
Do you feel that makes sense even if people don't eat in such a clean way as you do?
Great question, Alex. So I've been asked this question before. When I had a different diet, so back when I was going up and down, in and out, back and forth in the food frequency, when I was eating solid food and I was still drinking, my plasma, there were so many times that it was not even palatable. It was not manageable at all. Like, it was so bitter to the taste. It was just like, it did taste nasty. It did taste like, wow, it tasted toxic. But even though I had read the books, like Martha Christie's book, Your Own Perfect Medicine, and John Armstrong's book, the Water of Life, like these books are talking about people healing things like from cancer, to all sorts of ailments and illnesses and diseases, and also like from A to Z, people have healed, using their own water. So I knew that it was healthy. I knew that it was, rejuvenating, re-enlivening, and reinvigorating my cells, even though it tasted horrible. But it was the perfect biofeedback to let me know, okay, you don't need to eat that anymore. Okay, you don't need to have that anymore. Okay, you can put that down, right? And then over time, when I gravitated more towards juice, when I gravitated more towards coconut water, when I gravitated more towards these things that were more alkaline, alkaline things instead of like acidic things, less acidic things and more alkaline things, it started to change. So my water started to change, the color started to change, the look started to change, the odor, the smell started to change, and even the taste started to change. So everything changed, and it became lighter and more purified, more filtered. And it got to the point where it was literally just like water. So even today, I drink my own water and it's just like water, and I confidently say I'd rather have my own water than other water, than regular water, like regular spring water or mountain water, or, you know, what is it, the water that's popular, Kangen water, like all these different types of waters, bottled waters. I'd rather have my own than anything else, because it does for me what none of the other ones seem to do. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Jerome. I actually experimented with it about 2 years ago for 4 months. I didn't feel a huge difference, but um, I did really feel that it gave me a really good feedback of what I was eating, because it is definitely a more of a punishment than when you go off track. Well, when I was on fruit and coconut water, it actually tasted kind of like coconut water. So I really liked it for that kind of feedback. When I looked at the literature, I felt yes, they were healing a lot, but often they were combining it with fasting. So I was like, isn't it just that they were starting to fast and using the urine on top? Or that got me a little skeptical on it. But then also, yeah, socially, like for me, I have a partner and friends and all this. So it is something that has a lot of stigma in my, let's say, in my evolution. I'm definitely in some ways exploring and pioneering. And at the same time, I don't like to be too far from the uh, agreements of the collective consciousness, let's say, because then maybe I feel a little lonely on this way. But anyway, it's something I'm interested in, and I'm not practicing anymore. But that's why I asked you. I think it's interesting, and at least anyway, making it an option, making it something that you can talk about without being like, "Ooh, this is super weird," is I think cool. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Last
Thank you.
thing I'd love to ask you about before we finish this episode is you told me you've been writing a lot of books also, and so I know for my audience who are interested in being very healthy and thriving, and at the same time also creating in the world. That's what I love with what you're doing too, and nothing wrong with being a monk and being fully in meditation and in inner states. I think that's very beautiful way to live life, but at the same time, yeah, here for the sake of that podcast and these roles that we play, I love also the idea of creating and having impact in that way in the world. Yeah, has it been for you to write these books, and why do you like it so much?
It's been amazing, brother. Like it's it's like my highest excitement at the moment. It's my highest excitement. Like I love, talking to people. I love, that's definitely up there on the totem pole. I love having interviews and having conversations and just having, the dance of dialogue, conversation cuisine. That's food for me. I always come away from conversations like this feeling full. I feel so full. I'm satiated like on a cellular level and a cellular level when I have talks like this that really enliven my spirit and really just get my cells online. And when it comes to books, I was writing books. Well, not books, but I was writing short stories years ago when I was in high school. So this has been something like that has been in a long time coming, but I never finished anything. I was reading books and I was writing short stories, but I never like published anything. I never finished anything. The first thing I published was probably in 2019, that first time I started fasting. And my first book was called Sun Gaze for Success. This was when I was sun gazing. So I was feeling so much life and so much energy just gazing at the sun. I was like, let me do research on this. Let me write a book on this. Like, people need to know this. So that was like my first book, Sun Gaze for Success. And then after that, it was Finding Inner Peace, meditation and all sorts of different, methods and modalities and tools and tricks and techniques with finding inner peace, getting your mind more at ease. Then after that, there was Hunger for Freedom. That was when I was doing retreats with Ali Tom. And this was more, in the Qigong, in the fasting, and in the pranic realm of breatharianism, just understanding the whole culture surrounding this mysterious and esoteric word that people were struggling to understand. What is this thing? So that was Hunger for Freedom. And then after that, Breatharian Beginnings. Then after that, Pranic Living Unveiled. Then after that, Food Freedom, the Final Frontier. And then we've done the 48 Laws of Prana. That's the biggest nonfiction book that I've written so far, is the 48 Laws of Prana. And all of these are on Amazon. You can just type in my name, Jerome Shaw. It's going to pull up all 17 books. We're at 17 right now. So I've written 17 books. The rest of the books after the nonfiction are all fiction. And that is where I really come alive right now, is writing fiction, because fiction has been a big part of my life when it comes to what I've consumed. The material. Food is information, and information is food. So I've digested a lot of material when it comes to these fictional worlds and these universes that these characters are learning and discerning, and they keep that inner yearning and that fire burning for more knowledge and more lessons and their progression, and you get to see their direction, and you get to make that connection on an empathetic level. You can empathize with this character who's growing through things and going through things that can be very traumatic, that can be very, these obstacles, these adversity, this opposition in their way. And if they succeed, if they have victory, it's like you succeed, you have victory, because you're reading this other character. So I wanted to be one of those people that give people the same feeling that I had when I'm living the lives of these characters and understanding that, wow, So I put all of the pranic message, the pranic living message, all of the stuff that we're talking about here is in all of the books. So go ahead, have a look. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I can hear you definitely light up with this, and it's beautiful. Like fiction can be such a powerful way to share messages even more widely. So I love that. And last thing is, what's like? How can people connect with you? Do you coach people? Like, what are you offering at the moment? We'll put the links in the
Yes.
description.
Yeah. I do offer one-on-one coaching. So I have a personal link for that on my Calendly. So I offer one-on-one coaching for anything that we're talking about here, whether it comes to, fasting, pranic living, or even you know, just coaching for life, life coaching, just more focus, more concentration, more stick-to-itiveness, more willpower, just more inner understanding. And I've coached people with all kinds of things. So if you want to get with me on that, you can definitely just send me a DM, a direct message on Instagram. That's JROMESHAW. So J Rome Shaw on Instagram for that. And everything when it comes to pranic living, you know, that's patreon.com/
Yeah,
pranic
I'll
path.
put the links.
So
I'll put the links.
yeah, so
People can
that's the one that if people go there, then they'll see pretty much, yeah, a whole library of content that's continuing to grow as we're building
Thanks.
the material.
Amazing. Well, beautiful, Jerome. Thank you so much. And much love to you. Much love to everyone who is still hanging with us after almost an hour. And everyone have a beautiful day. Much love.